Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Swartwood here. Tonight, I am joined by a USA Today bestselling author and a Audie-Award winning narrator who has narrated over 1,000 titles. She has also appeared on Netflix briefly. That's right, it's your favorite narrator of mine, Tanya Eby. Tanya, how the heck are you?
Hi. Good. I'm excited.
Yeah, no, thanks for making time to do this. I think for people who are not aware, obviously, we're going to get into a lot of different stuff because I would say primarily you're known as a narrator, but you've also done some writing. You've also,
Mhm.
again, been on Netflix. We'll talk about that. Well, not Netflix. You were on an episode of a Netflix
An
show,
episode, one
right? There was an
episode.
episode. And I remember that was a Christmas themed episode, if I remember
Uh-huh.
correctly.
Yep.
Um, and you had actually narrated my novel, the Serial Killer's Wife, which was one of I guess over 1,000 titles that you've done.
Yeah.
So we definitely want to get into the whole narration of it all.
Right.
Um, so usually when these chats are more with authors and we kind of talk about like what's like the first kind of creative thing they've done. And with
Uh-huh.
narrators, usually we kind of go, most narrators start out because they want to be actors. At least that's what it usually seems like because
Yeah.
maybe nowadays, I guess, maybe, kids might want to grow up to be narrators, but usually, like, people don't usually want to grow up to become audiobook narrators. Because I guess,
Right. And I've been in it forever and it wasn't a
yeah, I
profession.
mean,
It
decades
wasn't a
ago,
thing.
like, this was back, I don't think people really appreciate the fact that there's Spotify and Audible and that you can just listen to an
Right.
audiobook right now from the pleasure of your cell phone. Whereas
Right.
before, you had there was books on tape, there was like the
Literal
CD, like
tape.
the
Right.
it was like the 10 sleeve CDs that, like, if you
Yeah.
were going on road trips, and it would only be like an hour per disc, and at the end
Yep.
of the disc it would say, please switch to disc number 5 or whatever. So
Right.
yes, I mean, people are spoiled nowadays when it comes to audio or to audiobooks, which I think is why audiobooks have become so popular.
Right.
Because I think audiobooks would have been popular in the past, but it was a pain in the ass to kind
Well,
of
it's
go
hard
through.
to carry around this huge stack of cassette tapes.
Yeah,
Some of us
exactly.
did it. I
And
did
not
it.
only
I go
that,
to
though,
the
they were
library.
expensive
They
too.
were very, yeah. So I got mine from
Yeah.
the library, but
Yeah, I think
yeah, it's
most
a lot
people would
easier
just
now.
run them out. Yeah, I would say run them out. But yeah, loan them out from the library because otherwise, if you wanted to buy like a big CD, I mean, it was like, we were talking like 40, $50,
Yeah.
probably at least. So, but all right, well, let's go. So, and you've done writing. So, can you talk back kind of like, let's go way, way back to a young Tanya. Like,
Okay.
what was the ultimate, like when you were growing up, what did you want to become? What did you want to do with your
Oh
life?
yeah, I mean, literally there were three things that were top of my little Tanya's list, and that was to be a writer, to be a professor, and to sell Avon. Um, and I have accomplished two of those things. So I don't even know if Avon is still around, but maybe I could still do that. So,
So,
and then
so what kind of like author did you want to be at that? Yeah, and you remember like what age? Do you remember like the very first thing you had done that would be considered creative?
no, I think I'm that kind of divergent thinker where my easy is creative. So I do remember being in school and we would have an assignment, and then my teachers would tell me that it was so creative. And I would literally be like, well, that was the easiest thing I could do. Like for me, it was obvious and kind of lazy. To them, it was creative. So does that make sense? Like,
Right, but I guess what were you? I mean, people just don't want to become a writer. They usually are inspired by somebody. Like, were you reading certain stuff at that time?
well, I really I did always want to be a writer. I don't even remember not wanting to be a writer. Um, I think I read Stephen King really, really early, and so a lot of my short stories, like when I was, I don't know, 10 or 11, were really brutal, very dark stories, which is funny because I'm kind of a bright person. Um, and I remember listening to radio shows. There was this old BBC drama that I used to listen to on my radio, that was like about the end of the world, an apocalyptic story, and I loved it. So I loved radio shows. I loved all that. I was just kind of a weird little kid. Um,
What was
so
your
yeah,
first
in
Stephen King
fact,
book?
what's that?
What was your first Stephen King book? Do you
My
remember?
first one, I think, was Pet Cemetery, was probably the first one that I read.
That, yeah, I mean, when it comes to Stephen King books, that's probably one of the darkest you could probably start with. Yeah.
Yeah, but I love The Talisman. That was one of my
Oh,
favorites.
yeah.
And then his short stories, and I mean, I tore through all of those. And then I had a bit where I was really into fantasy, and I read all the Dragon Riders of Pern, if you remember that series. And I just go to the library, and they'd give me books, and I would read them, and it was great. So a lot of narrators do get into narrating through acting, but for me, um, I have some acting experience like in college, but my goal was always writing. And I started writing out loud. Like I read some Faulkner when I was like 16, as I lay dying. And I couldn't understand it until I read it out loud because it's written in dialect. It's written in a Southern dialect, and it made no sense to me until I read it out loud. And when I read it out loud, suddenly it was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So that's where the acting kind of came in, was through the writing.
Yeah. So, but you mentioned the writing with the short stories,
Mhm.
like were you trying to get those published, or were you just writing them for fun, or
Um,
like what was the ultimate end goal with the short stories?
I don't even know that there was. I think I always wanted to be a published writer. So, I started with short stories and then I moved into poetry. In high school, I started entering competitions and trying to get published. And then when I was in college, I was sending my stories out and um, trying to be like literary was really I was trying to be that literary, scholarly kind of person. Um, and it's just gone on from there. Just it's just part of who I am, my DNA. It's writing,
Yeah. So
as I'm sure
you,
you want.
well, so then, okay, so how then did you get into audiobooks? And do you remember your very first audiobook that you ever did?
I remember a few audiobooks. I can't remember what my first one was. I started doing voiceover in college, just to earn some extra money. I had a friend who was doing some commercials locally, and I went in and decided I wanted to do it. So I wrote a script and I recorded a demo, and then they hired me for commercials. And then I did that for like 10 years. And then there happened to be an audiobook company in my area. Um, and I heard about them and applied and got them to hire me. Uh, and then I just started recording things. So it took a while to get started. And I got started before, like when you had to go into a studio, people didn't have home studios. So that was a benefit just by living in the area that I live in. There happened to be this studio. So that was luck.
Um, yeah, I think it was it Hillary Hubbard, Huber. I
Huber.
always get her. Yeah, she did this, voiceover work. Really was kind of her thing
Hmm.
too, at first,
Yep.
and then she got into it that way. So okay, so interesting. So you didn't really start out the whole acting. Have you ever done any acting, or was that ever anything you wanted to try?
Yeah, I was a theater minor. And
Okay.
I did a bunch of college plays and stuff, and I did some community theater. Uh, but for me, what was the most fun was actually the rehearsal process. And I didn't like memorizing. I have a lot of anxiety, so when stage time hit, I would get really freaked out and nervous that I was going to forget everything. So for me, audiobooks is perfect because you don't have to remember anything and you just read what's there. And it's very much a fresh and raw experience.
Yeah.
Whereas theater, once you're up and running, it's the same show over and over, and that just gets boring to me. So,
What was that first audiobook company? Do you remember that at least?
yeah, Brilliance Audio in Grand
Okay.
Haven, Michigan. So they're still around.
Yeah.
Um, And I think some of the first stuff I did was a Debbie McCumber. She's a successful romance author. And then I did some lesser known stuff, and then I moved into thrillers, and then I've done just a whole bunch of different genres.
Yeah, so based on your website, I think like over the thousands plus titles that you've done, at
Mhm.
least half are probably more the romance stuff.
Mhm.
So was that something that you enjoyed reading, or was it something where just they just needed a narrator and you just started narrating that and they just kind of, you just kind of became one of the go-tos for that
Yeah,
type
well, I
of
would say
genre?
for pleasure, I really like dark stories. I like thrillers, mystery, gothic, psychological horror. That's what I really love. But my voice isn't the first voice that you would think of for that kind of material. There's kind of a sweetness and brightness to my voice. So I think it was a natural fit for me to do romance, and it is the biggest seller in the industry. So it's not what I read for fun or pleasure. But I found really there's heartwarming stories and fun characters, and I found a way to make that fun for my work.
And then how about the transition then into the more thriller crime horror space? Because you've also done like Dean Koontz, correct? You've done some of Dean
Uh-huh.
Koontz novels.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
um, so like yeah, how was like do you remember maybe the very first thriller mystery crime title you had
Yeah,
done?
well, I do remember a Dean Koontz story. I did a collection of stories with other narrators, and I think I was the only female. And I do remember being directed, and I was so excited about it because I love it so much that the director had to keep telling me to, you know, calm down, go a little darker, not so excited about all of the murder and the whatever. So that's something I have to remind myself that it's so much fun for me, but I have to really like slip into the character and pull out the fan and set that aside.
Yeah.
So really fun.
What about the prep? I'm assuming
Mhm.
probably that has changed over however long you've been doing it. Or when did you first kind of start recording audiobooks? Do you remember the year, or at least kind of
Yeah,
the decade?
I think my first one, and the reason why there's I didn't start recording, like noting what books I had recorded until later in 2000, but I think my first book was recorded in 1999.
Wow.
So a while ago. And I know that because I moved to New York to become a writer in 2001. And I was there for September 11th, and I worked at Carnegie Hall, which was really cool. But while I was there, I was sending out my demo tapes, literal cassette tapes, to the publishers in New York to see if I could get them to hire me. And then 9/11 happened and everything just kind of stopped. So yeah, I think my first book was in 99, took a break, and then I got back into it full time after I had kids, which was like 2004, I think. I started doing it more full time,
Wow.
along with teaching writing at an art college. And yeah, I've done a whole bunch of stuff.
So, well, let's stick with the whole narration for now. So, you know, I think a lot of people think like, oh, someone's narrating a book, they're just reading the book. And I guess in a technical sense, yes, but at the same time, no, you're more performing the story.
Hmm.
Is that something like when you first did the first couple audiobooks, like what was your approach versus now? I mean, has that changed over the course of a thousand plus books, or like
Yeah,
was
I
your
mean,
approach, if you remember, like how you approached those, or like what type of prep you put in for those titles? Like, are you somebody that wants to read through the entire book first, or just read a couple, paragraphs, or like, and again, has that changed over the
so
course of the
yeah,
years?
that's for sure changed. And I learned a lot of hard lessons along the way. Um, I think in the beginning I almost over prepped because I was so nervous. And their audiobook narration was just a new thing, so there wasn't anybody to tell me what to do. So I just approached every audiobook narration as if I were on the stage, as if it were a monologue. Um, but acting on stage is a lot bigger than what it needs to be for audiobooks. So And if I had an accent that was required, I would just do it. I didn't do any research. I didn't see what was authentic. I'm an actor. I'm going to do the accent. So I've definitely taken that more seriously now. And if there's accents required, then I try to find authentic speakers and I try to study it. My prep has gotten a lot faster. I used to highlight in colors every speaker. And then it was just taking so long. And I realized this also informed my writing that in a lot of scenes, when you might have two characters, so they trade on and off in the conversation, obviously. So I didn't have to highlight everything. And now what I do is when I started narrating, we would get paper scripts. They were about like this thick, huge scripts, and you really did have to prep it, skim every page, see if there's accents, ages, characters, what happens. But now I can use search words. So I usually do like a really fast read and I do search words looking for anything that I need to research.
How often do you, I mean, ideally, if I'm assuming at least with the bigger publishers, they would have a producer who would probably at least give you a heads up on some of that stuff, right? Or are there times where you still have to kind of do all that legwork on your own?
Yeah, so well, I've worked in casting too, so I kind of understand the whole industry. And casting directors are really overloaded with work, as in most people are in publishing. So they read as much of the book as they can pretty fast, and they come up with who do they think will be the kind of narrator that will best tell the story. So, like in the book I narrated for you, it's the serial killer's wife. It's her story, even though you wrote it. It's really a woman's story. So it wouldn't make sense to have a male narrator. I mean, you could, but it makes more sense to have it be from the female's point of view. So that's one of the choices.
Yeah.
Um, and figuring out, who speaks, but um, they don't tell you what accents or ages or characters or anything. Every once in a while, you have an author who provides that, and it's so helpful when they do. Just a little cheat sheet just to make sure, because sometimes there's characters that appear in one book and they might have a line or two, and then the book becomes a series, and then they're the main character in the next book, and you find out they're from Russia, and you never knew that. So, we do our best, but that all of that prep work is on the narrator.
Well, speaking of series, I'm assuming at this point you've done
Uh-huh.
several series. Um, but of course, between books, you've probably then narrated, dozens, if not, more than dozens of titles. So do you go back to that previous, say you're about to narrate like a book five in a series that you've done. Do you
Mm-hmm.
go back to listen to some of book four? Or like how do you try to make sure that you're
Yeah.
maintaining, these different characters who, because
Hmm.
obviously you want to make sure that somebody who is listening straight through, book one through five, an audiobook, the main character is sounding the same. These other like, tertiary or secondary characters are sounding the same. I mean, like, how are you able to, I mean, yeah, like, what do you do about that to make sure that
Yeah.
those are
So,
consistent?
and in fact, I do remember I had done a fantasy series with like vampire killers, and I can't remember the name of it, but it was, if I'll remember it at some point. And it was so much fun. I actually had a listener write to me and say, in book seven, your voice from the character changed of Win from book one. Why did you do that? And I thought that was so funny because they noticed. So I do keep, especially if I know it's going to be a series, sometimes we don't always know. If I know it's going to be a series, then I keep detailed notes. I might actually record some character voices and keep a file of it
Mm.
so that I can reference it. And if I don't have that, then I just buy the audiobook and I scroll through and listen to what I did to kind of match the tone um, and the character voices. But what's weird is like
The publisher should be able to provide you with a copy.
they
Come
should,
on.
and they would if I asked. But a lot of times I just get it or whatever. But yeah. Uh, and it's what's funny is that a lot of times when I narrate a piece, like I forget you don't keep it because if you can't keep all those characters in your head or you'd go mad. So But what's interesting is returning to a series, something happens and like it, you can access the voices that you've done before.
Hmm.
Um, it's some kind of weird body memory.
Yeah, well, I mean, well, in the green room, we had discussed how you were narrating a title, I guess, today, but you don't
Mhm.
really remember what you were narrating like 2 weeks ago.
I don't.
How how many titles are you typically narrating, like in a week? Like in a week, do you at least get one title done, or do you maybe manage to do one and a
Well,
half? I mean, like
it,
yeah, like what is a typical narration day for you?
um, my goal is 4 to 6 books a month, but it really depends on how long they are. So my goal for reading an easy, like a light recording day would be to get 2 finished hours recorded. And that's me in the booth, but then taking a break and doing email and writing and going
Right.
back.
So for people
So,
who aren't aware, obviously when we talk about finished hour, like say like an audiobook, I don't know. I usually try to equate like every 10,000 words to about an hour. So like a hundred
that's right.
thousand word novel, three or 400 page novel could be about maybe like
Mhm.
10 hours, give or
Yeah,
take
and
on
mo like
audiobook.
most books that you see in a airport are probably 6 to 9 hours
Right.
long.
So a finished hour is what is that finished hour? That is basically what ends up going into people's ears. But
Yeah,
you don't
so a
just
finished
sit
hour.
down and narrate a finished hour. I mean, how long does it typically take you to get like a finished hour? Like, is it like 2 hours, 3 hours to like get that
Yeah,
finished out?
the ratio for most narrators is 2 to 1. So to get one finished hour takes you two. Depending on how tough the book is or how much experience you have, it might be pretty close to 1 to 1, or it could be 4 to 1. So it really depends, but usually 2 to 1. So if it's a 10-hour book, it will probably take me 20 hours to record it.
Now, was that always, I mean, so like when you were starting out, like has that changed over the years,
Yeah,
I guess?
I've gotten a lot better. But little things that were really hard is like things that you think you know how to pronounce and you say it and then someone stops you and says that is not how you say that word. Um, the one that comes to mind is rendezvous. I never knew what rendezvous was, and it's rendezvous.
Oh.
So I was raised in Michigan in Coopersville. Like we don't know these things. So that really slowed me down for a long time. Um, the timbre of his voice, it's not timber, even though it's spelled timber, it's the timbre. So all of those things would stop me. And now I've learned that. So when I see it, I just kind of flow right through.
What about
So
when
I've
it
gotten
comes
a
to
lot more efficient.
Yeah, what about when it comes to pickups though? And for people who aren't aware, pickups are because you essentially whatever is on the page, you have
You have
to
to read.
narrate, even
Yes, yeah.
though I'm sure you probably come across stuff that you realize like, oh, there's a typo here or there's a missing word. Like, do you maybe kind of do another take knowing that they're going to come back, or like do you just kind
Well,
of you just
there's a
go over
little
it
wiggle
and
room. Like if it's obviously a typo, I'm gonna fix it, and I usually fix it on the fly. Like I see it and I realize that a the is missing, and I'll just add it in. So those are okay, but we can't change anything. We can't edit anything. So if there's a lot of he said's and she said's, we have to keep all of that in. Um,
Well, yeah, I mean, so one of my questions usually for narrators, we'll kind of jump ahead. Like, do
mhm.
you, is that a pet peeve? Like, what type of pet peeves have you discovered that you have as a narrator that you wish authors would be aware of? Like, hey, this is something you might want to consider because I feel like a lot of authors, it's kind of crazy, quite honestly, how many authors I've talked to who don't really listen to audiobooks, which is
Yeah.
fine. But with the way that audiobooks have become such a big part of the publishing industry, and for me personally, I kind of feel like good writing is writing that has a nice flow to it. It's something that
Mhm.
especially is translates really well over into audio. And so I feel like that's something that you need to at least be aware of. So, you might not love audiobooks, but it'd be good to at least kind of listen to audiobooks occasionally. It's kind of like, get that. So, I mean, yeah, for me, when there's a lot of speech tags, I mean, even usually when I'm reading a book, I'm usually just kind of glossing over the speech tags anyway, because you can usually tell
Right,
who. I mean, I'm usually a fan of like the fewer speech tags, the better,
right,
because it should be clear who's speaking.
right.
Um, and I remember, well, I'll just say who it is. It was an old Robert B. Parker novel, and it was like
Mhm.
listening to the audiobook, and it was like every line between two characters was
Yeah,
just he said, or I was like I said and she said, I said, she said, I said, she said. And it was
it was
maddening.
a
So
lot. Well, I
so
think
like
there's
yeah, so is
things,
there anything that sticks out to you?
yeah, and there's two things, and they're actually things that have made me, I think, a better writer. One of them is to be more economical, to pare down the unnecessary words. So when you have to read every single word on there, when there's long sections that are tangents that don't really add to the plot, it's hard as a narrator and it's hard as a listener to follow that. So for me, that's a challenge, but it also made me a better writer because now I try to take that out. For tags, he said, she said, a lot of us, they're kind of there's a way to say it where they don't have as much weight as the dialogue, she said. Sort of like you just kind of throw it away. The other thing that I wish authors knew was how difficult pronouncing names is. So one thing authors could do when they are writing a book is keep in mind that that might be an audio. So, especially for fantasy writers, they have wonderful, wonderful names, but some of them, when you're reading them, you kind of gloss over the name and you know who the character is. When you're narrating it, you have to actually say that name, however many times it's in there. So there was an elf name that I had to say that I always talk about, and I still don't pronounce it right, but it was like Shashquilahala, something like that, really long. So think of the names and even things that seem obvious to you to pronounce, your narrator might come up with a totally different way. So if the pronunciation is important to you, you would want to tell your narrator that. But too many words and difficult names
Yeah.
are struggles.
Which I think is still a good reason for authors to when they're like going through their own drafts to read their work aloud
Yeah.
to again go back to see if there's good flow, if it just sounds right, because even very awkward sentences. I mean, yes, to the eye, it could sometimes catch it, but you can definitely usually hear it if you're reading it aloud or if it's something that
Mhm.
somebody is reading to you.
And
So
I
I think,
remember
yeah.
the first book of mine that I narrated, I didn't know that I kept having the characters breathe. So he would breathe instead of saying he said, he breathed, which sounds great once or twice, but when you say that same phrase 100 times, then it's like, oh, and you don't know it when you're writing it, but when you're reading it out loud, all of a sudden you see these patterns of phrases that you use over and over and over.
Well, since that was one of your own books, were you
Yeah,
able to kind of tweak that and fix that, or at that point it was like it was
I
locked
was. I
in?
had control to fix that,
Okay, that's good.
which is great. I
I think you
didn't do
meant
it again in my next book, so
yeah, you mentioned obviously studios for the longest time and a narrator had to go into an audiobook studio to record. I feel like especially since the pandemic, a lot of audiobook
yeah, it's
narrators have really
changed.
kind of built their own studios in their homes so that they are able to just I don't want to say roll out of bed, but like they're basically doing a lot of their work in home. At the same time, I know that a lot of audiobook narrators do like though going to a studio. They like kind of not necessarily being in the home. I mean, do you have your own studio? Like, was that even pre-COVID, or was that something that came about because of the lockdown?
Um, I I had one before COVID, because I was looking at the market and seeing the direction that things were going. And also because I wanted to not just rely on one publisher. I needed more clients. So, and I live in Michigan. So most of the audiobook work was being done in New York and LA. And so I thought early on that a home studio would make me competitive, and it did. So I was already up and running during COVID, but there was a huge influx of talent. And I would say now probably 80 to 90% of of narrators have a home studio. I have one. My husband built it for me, which is really great. Um, and I I love my little nook. It's also nice to go into a studio. When you're narrating from home, you have to do all the engineering by yourself. So you're pressing the buttons, you're thinking about the sound, you're thinking of your interpretation, how you're pronouncing things, all of this. So it's your brain is doing a lot of different work. When you go into the studio, all you have to do is read the text and act. And you have a director taking care of all of the other stuff and worrying about it. So um, the difference is uh, it's a lot easier, it's a lot more relaxing. So yeah, when I have the opportunity to go to a studio, I'm always on board with that.
Yeah. How far out right now are you? And I know it kind of probably varies month by month, but how far out are you currently booked with projects?
I still have a lot of space in my calendar. We're reaching right now, publishing kind of shuts down for November and December, as you know, probably because of holidays and everybody just kind of leaves the office. So, I have a lot of space in my schedules, but I have books until I think July, a book a month.
Wow.
But I would like to have 4 or 5 books a month. So, uh, yeah, I'm still working
Yeah.
to fill that.
And I mentioned during the intro, obviously, and we're going to get to the writing, USA Today best-selling author, which is great. Also, as far as the narrator, Audie Award winning. And for people who are not aware, the Audies are like, you know, the audiobook Oscars.
They are,
So
yeah.
what title was that? And was it just one title you won, or like have you been nominated for other titles? Do you remember?
I've
Like,
been nominated a number of times. The one I won for was really satisfying because it was the first book I produced independently for my company, Blunder Woman Productions, when I was running that. And it was a collection of short stories called The Brink by Austin Bunn. um, Speculative fiction, really, really cool stories. So I wanted to show what Michiganders could do. We have a great community of actors here. So I hired everyone who performed on the book was from Michigan as well as the writer. And it won, I think like in 2017, but that was the first one. And then I've been nominated for other ones and haven't won.
well, it's always
But
an
that's
honor to
okay.
be
It's being
nominated,
it's
but
being
you
great
won
to be
already,
nominated.
so it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. So as long as you won. So was
Yeah.
it, so it was a collection. So like, did the other narrators also win? I mean, were they
Hmm.
also the,
Yep.
but,
Pretty exciting.
and if I remember correctly, though, like the Audies are, though, are more of like when somebody wins an Audie Award, that
Mhm.
award really goes to the publisher. It doesn't go to the narrator, it doesn't go to the author. Like the so
Right.
like, but because you were the publisher, did you actually like you have it?
I
You
do
have
have
it.
it. Yes. Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting.
It was exciting. It was really cool.
So all right, well let's start talking a little bit about the well, first of all, before we get into that, let's talk about in terms of the narration. Do you have a preference in terms of all the different genres that you've done? Like, if you had to stick with one right now, what would that be?
Um, Boy, my heart's really with thrillers and mysteries, um, true crime, nonfiction. But yeah, I still love heartwarming stories. I feel like for me, books are sort of like music, in the way that there's some days where you want to listen to jazz, and there's some days where you want yacht rock. At least I do. So for me, books are the same. It's kind of a different book for any mood.
Okay.
Um,
And
yeah.
you mentioned the Blunder Woman.
Hmm.
W Talk about that because I remember I think on I haven't been on Twitter in years now, but
Yeah,
like
me too. Yeah, I was
that was
pretty
your
active on.
username, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
It was
yeah. Can you talk about
actually the
what that came about? Yeah.
yeah, so I've always been really kind of awkward. I have a lot of anxiety. I stumble a lot. I make weird gaffes. And I was always so embarrassed by it. But then I wrote my first book, I think that got published was called Blunder Woman. And it just became my brand of just kind of claiming awkwardness. And it was a rom-com, so it made sense. And then that became my Twitter handle. And it allowed me to be comfortable being awkward and different. So that was my production company name. So it was really cool.
Do you still do anything under that? The production company?
I do sometimes, yes. I still have it up and running and I still have a union contract if I want to produce books for people. And I might look at doing that again. But yeah, I produced a bunch of titles for Audible and Brilliance and HarperCollins and indie writers. So it was really satisfying.
So on your website, it mentions that you've written a couple Gothic novels, a cookbook,
Mhm.
and romance titles.
Yeah, it's kind of all
How'd the
over.
cookbook come about?
Well, I love cooking. Um, and so, yeah, my writing, I think that has been a struggle for me in terms of like finding an audience because I write across genres, just like I narrate across genres. I just find that really satisfying. Um, and a bunch of people were telling me that I should write a cookbook. And so I did, but I'm just bored by just recipes. So I put in all of these really funny, quirky stories. And instead of writing recipes like normal, there's a bunch of swear words in there. And like within the recipes themselves, it just was a fun, I'm going to try something different. So that one is called Sweet and Sorrow. Um, and yeah, it was really, that was a fun experience.
And was this before or after you were on Nailed It on Netflix?
That was before. Yeah. And
So how
then,
did the Nailed It come about?
so Nailed It, for people who don't know, it's a baking competition show, but it really highlights people who don't bake well. And I love to cook and I love to bake, but I'm terrible at decorating. And I also don't have a lot of focus. So I forget, I don't know if it's an ADD thing, but recipes are hard. And anyway, so I've watched cooking shows all the time. That's like what I do. And Nailed It came on, and my kids, who were really, they were like 10 or 11 at the time, and they said, if you were ever on a show, Mom, you should be on this one because you're not a very good baker. And I said, you're right. And so I looked it up and I applied. And next thing I knew, I was flying out to LA and I was on the show. So it was really, it was really
So,
great.
I mean, was there like what was the
It
selection
was a
process like?
It was an audition process. Yeah, I just happened the timing of it, I think I had just filled out my application and I was really used my writing and humor skills on the application. And it just happened to be when they were casting, like right at the same moment. And then I had a bunch of interviews on Zoom. Um, they did research to make sure that I was a safe person. I had callbacks and I remember I was at the Audis in New York for narrating, and they called me and said, "Can you be here in 2 days?" So I left New York. I came home for a day, and then I left and went out and recorded that little competition show. So made a couple of great friends that we still talk to each other, the people that I competed with. Um, and I would totally do it again. It was it was really, really fun.
Not to spoil it for people, but I kind of forget. Did you win or not?
Did win.
You did win. Oh,
I did
congratulations.
win. Yes. Thank you.
Um, okay. Well, so let's talk about your other writing. When you are
Yeah.
writing, I mean, I'm assuming like the majority of your work, or I guess, most of your income comes from the narrating. So
Right.
I'm assuming the writing is kind of like you have to really squeeze it in where you can. Or do you try
Yeah.
to make, do you try to set time every day to write, or like I guess how are you fitting writing into your busy narration schedule?
Yeah. So writing happens in between the spaces of narrating. So basically, I'll be in the booth for about an hour, and then I really need to get up and move around and just refocus my brain. And then I'll come out and maybe write a couple of lines or a paragraph or a page if I have time. And then I get back in the booth and repeat the process. So I spend a lot of time kind of pre-writing. I don't know what your process is like, but for me, I think about a story or a scene a lot like when I'm out walking. Uh, and then when I get the time to sit down, it usually comes pretty quickly, but that's because I've been thinking about it and turning it over in my head for a while.
So you're not
So,
really outlining, you're just sitting down and just, I mean, because you've been thinking about it, but you're not somebody who
right.
feels like you have to really say, okay, this is what's going to happen in chapter one, chapter two, chapter three.
Yeah, I've tried that recently, just because I needed some help with plotting issues. Um, and it works. I can have like a skeleton plot, a little outline, just some major points that I want to hit, but I'm definitely more of a person that just lets it happen the way that it wants to happen.
And so how many books have you written so far? Just like solo novels.
I haven't, seven or eight, maybe. Um,
And have they all been published, or are there some where you're just like,
well,
this is not ready yet to for
yeah,
people for public consumption?
I have some early novels that are secret and on my desktop, which will probably never be shared. So I do have those. Um, but yeah, I've been self-publishing my recent stuff. And I self-published, my most successful was co-written with Sarina Bowen, and that's actually rom-coms, which I love. I love humor, and I love writing humor. So that was a good fit. But it turns out that I'm not good at writing romance on my own because there was like too much blood and murder in it, and that's just apparently not what
Yeah.
belongs in rom-coms. So now I'm
Well,
digging into my thriller roots and my horror roots.
yeah. Well, I did want to talk a little bit. So this the Serena Bowen like co-authoring, how did that come about?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. My dogs are freaking out. I think
That's okay.
getting a package. Hold on. So I had recorded a book for Serena, and she happened to be a friend of my then husband's in Michigan. So she was starting out writing and she had asked me to record a book for her and I recorded it for her. And I really just got a great sense of her. Like it was really easy for me to read. Sometimes you can slip into an author's voice and it's just effortless. And I had started writing this book called Man Hands, which I was just making really absurd and funny. And about 150 pages in, I ran out of plot because I was really just kind of telling jokes. And I sent it to her and I said, "Hey, any chance you want to work on this?" Which was a really big ask. But she happened to have, again, this is a timing thing. She happened to want to work on her comedy. And she thought it was so funny that she just couldn't resist. So we ended up writing four books together. And that's what hit the USA Today bestselling list,
So
which
what was
was,
that
yeah.
collaboration? I mean, so you've for some authors it's easy to collaborate with other authors. For other authors you know, it's very much like, I'm the writer, I'm going to do what I want to do, and it's kind of hard
Yeah.
to, I mean, like was it easy or like, I mean, like what was
With
her writing
Serena,
style
yeah.
versus yours, like, and how you meshed
Yeah,
them?
with her, I've had two experiences. So with her, it was effortless. But we both, I think the control issues that you might have, I didn't really feel that way. I was learning from her and she was learning from me in some ways. And we would just both write like 3 pages and then send it to the other person. And it became like a tennis match of like back and forth, really, really fun. And then I had another writer
Did you have it
friend.
like a general outline though, of like where you wanted the story to go?
We Not really. We kind of talked, we had like a couple of plot points. We had to figure out. So for the first book, I had the first 150 pages. We had to figure out that there was no real conflict. And that just doesn't work. So we had to go back and insert conflict in, and then kind of would say, in this chapter, I'm going to write about this. And this is something that's going to happen. So we had just a real vague kind of thing. But then I had another partner I tried to work with, and I think I'm a pretty easy person to work with, but he was very regimented, and he had a hard time uh, collaborating. So that one didn't work. So I think
Yeah,
you have to find the right fit, someone that you can communicate with and trust and want to take risks with. Because you
yeah,
do have to give up quite a bit of control, which can be really hard, especially when you're used to writing on your own.
absolutely. So,
Yeah.
on also you on your website, you mentioned something about like a mystery series. Is that what's going on with that? Have you released any of the books in the mystery series yet, or is that something that's been ongoing and in
Oh, did I talk
flux?
about the new series? Yeah. So, well, I have a loose series that's a is historical. One takes place in an insane asylum, and then the other one's a prequel to that. And then I have recently is The Knowing, and that's about a woman who had a traumatic brain injury, and she starts having premonitions, and she dreams that her husband dies. And then when he does, she has to figure out uh, if it was a true premonition or did she actually plan his murder. And so that's the one, The Knowing, that I've been thinking of writing a sequel to, but I haven't gotten around to it yet. So right now I'm writing horror short stories, and that collection just came out. That's called Primal. And the collection I'm working on now is called Funhouse Carnival, which is a carnival themed collection of scary stories.
Very nice. Now, have these stories been published elsewhere, or are these just stories that you've collected over the years that you've
No,
written?
I had a really terrific agent with my last three books. The other one I have is The Takers. It's a mushroom, kind of like a cross between Soylent Green and Coma, if you're familiar with those, but about mushrooms growing on bodies. And I had a really fantastic agent, but the publishing industry for me, it takes so long and
Mhm.
things have changed. They really want people who have huge followings, social media followings. I have a few thousand. I don't know. I just didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. I found it too frustrating. So right now, because narration is my main income and writing is my passion, I'm just leaning into writing whatever I want without having to worry about what publishers want, which has been very nice.
Yeah. So let's talk about your memoir, The
Hmm.
Tuesday Girl, which I see Julia Whalen has left you a
Hmm.
blurb, a searingly visceral memoir of contemporary life. Um, how did that come about? Why did you decide, you've done fiction, narration, why did you want to write a memoir?
I didn't want to write a memoir. It just sort of happened. I was taking a writing class during COVID, um, just to keep me. I felt like I needed some focus. I was actually working a lot of narration during that time, and I wanted some goals. And there were the little exercises that we were little writing exercises about with prompts from our real life. And I started writing these little tiny snippets and then after the class ended, I kept writing them. And at the time, I happened to be going through a divorce, reinventing myself in my late 40s, dating again. And then this crazy thing happened. And as I was living it, I was writing about it. And that's what became the memoir, which is why when you read it, it does feel very visceral because it was written almost in real time.
Mm.
And then,
And this was extension. Now you had this, I guess, not let's say an article, I guess an essay
yeah.
on Huff Post back what the 20, I guess after COVID, 2020,
Mhm.
so, or 2022, and
I think
then
it was 2022. Yeah.
and so that the memoir kind of came about because of that. Is that accurate or?
I think they were kind of happening at the same time. I was working on this memoir and I decided I had dated a man who I just was really hoodwinked by. Like I thought we had this deep connection. And then I found out that he was actually dating someone else and had been for 3 years and was actually dating four other women at the same time. And it was just a really horrible experience. I didn't know that people could lie. Like I just was so trusting that it really floored me. And I ended up writing an article for the Huffington Post and they published it. And then it kind of went viral. Like it had something like 200,000 views within 24 hours. Um, and while that was out, I already had a draft of the memoir, and that's when I got my agent.
Okay.
So we thought a publisher would go for it, and it did get uh, debated, and they were thinking, there were a few places that were debating it, and then ultimately decided that it was, I'm not a celebrity, I don't have a huge following, and they didn't think that it would sell. So that was kind of a bummer.
There was a viral article. Isn't
I
that
know,
enough?
I know. I thought it should be, but it wasn't.
Yeah, no, publishing
So
is it's not a fun business. I don't know.
it's
I always say
really
it's a terrible business. I don't know why anybody wants to do it. Just because,
right.
obviously mostly because writers love writing and they and they want to write, but the actual business aspect can just be pretty
Business can
awful.
be brutal. And I think for me too, because I also have the narration, it's really hard when everything you're doing creatively, you're getting no's all the time. So I would audition and get a no. I'd have my book out and have a no, and it just became too much to carry. So if I were doing one or the other, I could probably just focus on that. But doing both, I just couldn't. So now I write for the joy of it.
Which I mean, quite honestly, is it sounds hokey, but really you should always be writing more for yourself. I mean, obviously you want to write with
Right.
like a an audience in mind, but you want to write something
Yeah.
that I feel like that you enjoy because I feel like there are times where certain authors they want to write in a very popular genre,
Right.
and oftentimes the reader can tell that that their heart just isn't in it. It's like they're just trying to kind of, catch that next wave
Well, and I
and,
think
and go from there.
that's exactly what happened with me. I tried to write romance. I tried so hard. I tried for like 2 years because Manhan series was so successful. But what I loved about writing the Manhan series was the humor and not necessarily the romance. So I wasn't playing by the rules and my soul wasn't in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, actually, real
Now
quick,
my
can you
soul,
talk about like what is the Manhand series about?
oh,
Because when
it's
I
just
think
a
of Manhand,
crazy
I think of
series,
that one, of course, Seinfeld episode with the
right?
woman with the man hands.
Right, yeah. It's Man Hands, Boy Toy, Man Card, and I forget what the other one is. Just a ridiculous story of a group of friends and their dating experiences. It's over the top, it's raunchy, it's very, very funny. Um, yeah, and in the first one, I think she's a food blogger who falls for a guy who does TV renovation, household renovation shows. So hence the man hands and the tool belt and all that.
I feel like I was looking on your website earlier.
Mhm.
Oh, there it is. So this was something that never really even occurred to me, and I forget which narrator I had been chatting with previously, who had mentioned it kind of offhand, and
Mhm.
apparently this is something a lot of narrators do. Um, you also narrate under like pseudonyms.
Yeah, yeah. Tatiana
So
Sokol and Amber Reed are my not so
so
secret
and
pseudonym.
then how did those come about? And I mean, not only because like
Yeah.
usually like there's just like one other pseudonym, like you have two different pseudonyms.
I do have two. Well, the first one came about, I think it was when 50 Shades had happened and became really popular, 50 Shades of Grey. And then I had a publisher say, we have this pretty naughty book. Would you like to narrate it? And would you like to record it under another name? And so I said, sure, I'll try it. And I came up with, I thought, who would I be called if I were um, classy and distinguished and mysterious. And so I changed Tanya to Tatiana. And then that sounded Russian, so I thought Sokolov. But now it's kind of just seems like a ridiculous name. So I tried to come up with a different one that was more serious, and I came up with Amber Reed. But she hasn't really taken off, not
How
like
many
Tatiana.
titles have you done under those pseudonyms?
So I think I've done about 900 under Tanya Eby and 300 or 400 under Tatiana.
Wow.
And they're fun. I mean, for me, like again, I love stories of all kinds. So one of my favorite thing to narrate is motorcycle romances. Because you have these really broad, gritty characters and this the stakes are really, really high, and it's super fun.
Yeah. And narrators often start building their own fan base. Like people will listen to an audiobook because of the narrator. Have you
Uh-huh.
found any of your pseudonyms having a fan base specifically just for the
Oh
pseudonym?
yeah. Oh yeah, a lot of my friends and I was part of the romance narrators group for a long time, but kind of stepped back from it. But yeah, a lot of my friends, their pseudonyms are bigger than themselves, and they have fans, and they go to conferences, and it's kind of a crazy world.
Wow. And we talked briefly in the green room about how I imagine it's difficult, since reading essentially is your profession, that it's
hmm
probably difficult to read for pleasure at this point.
It is. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard. It's mostly because it's also hard to write. Like I used to love foreign movies, but it's hard to sit and read subtitles
Hmm.
after a day of reading and being on the computer and writing. I found that if I want to read for pleasure, I probably need a paperback or a hardcover because everything I record is from an iPad or a Kindle. So that tells my brain that this is for fun. Right now, I'm reading a Riley Sager book, the one on the train. I think it's his most
Oh
recent
yeah,
one.
with a Vengeance. That was the one that
Yeah,
came
and
out
I'm
this past
enjoying it.
year. Yeah,
Yeah, but it's taken me like 2 months, and I'm halfway through. But it can take me 2 days to read a book in the booth.
yeah.
So, yeah, it's just a little bit different. I think that's the one trade-off I miss. I did love going to the library and just getting stacks of books to read just for fun, and I do miss that.
So do you ever find yourself browsing like in a bookstore and you come across a book and you're like, wow, this sounds really interesting. And then you
Yeah.
start reading it and realize I narrated this.
That hasn't happened, but I've had people tell me that I've narrated something and I don't know what they're talking about. And I go back and check and I'm like, oh, yeah, that was me.
Yeah,
So,
so at this point, so over a thousand, I mean, do you know exactly how many titles like as of,
yeah.
you know, t today you have narrated or
Last count was 1276.
oh wow.
Yeah.
So you have
So
like
that
you have like an Excel spreadsheet or something
I
that you're
do.
just logging them as you go now?
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who doesn't mind detail work, and I pay her a little bit, and she updates it twice a year for me with both my pseudonym titles and my regular. Just and it's good to see like who I've recorded for, just to have a record of it, because after 7 years, a lot of books do disappear from. Not everything I've recorded is available anymore.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a good reference point, and also, um, yeah, it gives me a little bit of street cred, maybe telling how people how many things I've been in this industry for a long time and it shows. Pretty proud of that number.
Yeah, so how many titles are you averaging, I guess, per year then to get to that number? If you started back in, well, you said it was like 99.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on
Um,
30 years? Well, no,
yeah,
not
I
even
tend
30 years
to,
quite yet.
oh gosh, that's scary. I think I've been full time since like 2004. Usually it's between 60 and 70 titles a year.
Oh, wow. And obviously, I mean, some titles are
They're all
shorter than
different lengths.
others.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And some are dual reads where you have a female reading the one chapter
Yes,
and then
that I wanted
switching
to get to
over.
that. So yeah, I
Yeah.
completely slipped
So
my
that's
mind at
really
first.
popular too.
And I feel like those have gotten even more popular recently. So when you're working on a project like that, and we talked about the prep, do
Yeah.
you also like to see, especially if it's like a novel where maybe there's like three or four narrators, do you
hmm
like to just focus on whatever your parts are, or do you also kind of want to see what's happening in the rest of the book to get an idea as that
Yeah,
might also impact your
yeah,
sections?
you really do. You really have to read the whole book, or at least, become really familiar with it. And in an ideal situation, all of the narrators are sharing files and talking about choices. It doesn't always work that way in reality. But the productions that do work, we've shared that. So you're kind of, even if you're not sounding exactly like the other person you're reading with, you might take on some of their cadence or their character's attitude just to help that make it cohesive. So
Yeah.
I listened to a book this summer. I actually listen to more books than I read now, where it was clear that the narrators didn't have that communication because their accent choices were different.
Hmm.
So that can be confusing. So it can be tricky, but you should communicate. You should read the whole book.
So when you're listening, then if you listen to a lot more audiobooks than books that you read,
Hmm.
are you able to kind of, I don't want to say disconnect, but like, are you able to listen to an audiobook for pleasure, or are you also kind of in a way analyzing and kind of like picking apart, being like, that wasn't a good, that wasn't a good
No,
choice there.
I listen a lot for pleasure. I'm able to, but a lot of times it's things that I wouldn't necessarily record myself.
Hmm.
So, there's a series, it's like day 1, day 30, I don't know what it is. It's an apocalyptic novel about uh one of those electronic pulses that wipes out all of the electronics.
Yeah.
And I forget who was originally the narrator, but in the second book, it became Bronson Pinchot.
Hmm.
Um, and I loved listening to it, and I could listen to it solely as a fan. But, he's a male narrator, and it's a very different book than I would be cast in. I have a little harder time with things that are closer to home.
Okay, so like audiobooks that are narrated by females, you might be a little bit more,
I
you
might,
know.
well, right now I'm listening to one of my favorite narrators is Saskia I forget her last name,
I know
Martha.
her name is so
You know,
difficult to
Yeah,
pronounce.
she's wonderful. She's really
Yeah.
wonderful. And Julia Whalen, of course, too. But I have lots of friends who narrate. I think what's harder for me is when they're my friend or we've hung out. Sometimes that can be a little weird because you know the person and you're hearing their voice and that's your friend. Um, but no, I can still enjoy it and separate myself from it. And uh, that's really pleasurable. I love it. I love audiobooks. Not every narrator does, which is funny. Just like a lot of writers don't listen to audiobooks, a lot of narrators don't, but I happen to just be such a super fan of stories that I'll consume it any way I can.
Yeah. So in the time remaining, what are you working on, or what like? I know you've done a lot of different projects, and I don't want to make it seem
Uh-huh.
like you're like picking favorites, but are there any recent projects or anything in the past that has stuck with you that you would really recommend to other people?
Oh, oh, that's a really good question. Well, I can think of one I'm really excited for that I'm going to record in 2 weeks, and that's Oh Pioneers by Willa Cather for
Oh,
Spotify. She was actually one of the writers I studied in college. I created my own course and studied Virginia Woolf and Edith Wharton and Willa Cather. So I'm super excited about that. I have a nonfiction piece coming up from Tantor that I'm going to record about food, which I love. I did love recording your book, and I don't know if people have checked that out, but I would recommend that they do.
they
The
should
serial
definitely
killer's
check it
wife.
out. The Serial
Yeah,
Killer's Wife,
they should
narrated by
listen to it. But
Tanya.
one thing that really stood out to me is that for me and a lot of female narrators, we don't get a lot of strong female characters with good action sequences.
Hmm.
And I love action sequences. And there was so many in there and so many just propulsive storytelling was really, really fun. So people should check that out. And if they want to check out one of my pieces, I would say The Takers or The Tuesday Girl. Um,
Now, all of your books, did you narrate all yours, or were there certain titles that you had another person come in and narrate?
yeah, so I've done it both ways. The Knowing, which is recent, is narrated by Sarah Shekels, and she's amazing. My collection of short stories, the scary short stories, Primal. I have six powerhouse female narrators, including Hilary Huber, who you mentioned, and Carol Monda, Amy McFadden, Amy Landon, Sarah Shekels, Siri Scott. Andy Arndt. Um, oh, I hope that's everyone. I think that's everyone. Um, really uh, powerful, wonderful narrators. And if you're interested in finding new narrators, I recommend listening to short stories with a multicast because that gives you really a good feel for how a narrator tells a story, and maybe it's someone you'll want to listen to for a whole book.
Yeah. Have you ever done any of those? And I forget what they're called because we you talked about the duets, but there's the
Mhm.
what's the narration? And I just recently listened to the new Harlan Coben and Reese Witherspoon, and that audio
Oh,
book. Um, they do that thing where the main character is narrated by Reese, and she does her
uh-huh.
own narration of the exposition and also dialogue. But then when she's talking to other characters, it's
Uh-huh.
another. It's like a male like narrator. If it's a male character or it's a female. Like I'm not always a fan of that. Like, have you ever done those?
Yeah, I have done those. I've not done very many. They're very expensive to produce.
Yeah.
And it really helps if you have the actors in the studio at the same time. But I have done those. So if it's just a male and a female, it is called a duet. Duet means kind of like they're singing together at the same time, whereas a duel means they're changing. You'll have chapters that change. Or it could be called a multicast.
Mm-hmm.
So, for me, like I said, I was raised, one of the things I found as a kid was radio shows, old-timey radio shows from the 40s and 50s, which I loved. So for me, some of the stories I like, some of it really works well and some of it's confusing.
Yeah.
So it really just depends on your preference.
Yeah, I think for me, to be fair, one of the ones that I had listened to like that was a long time ago.
Hmm.
And honestly, I'll just say it was a David Baldacci novel, probably
Uh-huh.
20 years ago. And
Yeah.
I just don't think it wasn't produced well. So like
Right.
it just felt very disjointed in a way. Like it wasn't as seamless where probably, yes, it's better when there are people in the studio and they're playing off each other. So it's not just like a line thrown in that doesn't have the
Right.
same, tone or whatever that
And
it
I
should with
think
what's going on.
there's lots of different thinkers and people process sound differently. For me, I really am most comfortable with one narrator who's doing voices because to me that's immersive. And
Yeah.
when I hear different voices, it kind of pulls me out for a second.
Yeah. No,
But some people love it.
it
For
can
some
be
people, it's what they
disorienting
need.
and conjarring. So that's always, and it's conversation I've had, I've done some stuff with Audible and we've always talked about like, they're working on like a lot more enhanced stuff, like bringing in
Yeah.
like sound effects. And I actually just had a meeting, I think a week ago or whatever with the editor, and where it was like, like trying to come up with ways that it's not going to be jarring to, a
Right.
listener who, because if it comes out of nowhere, like, halfway through a book, then like it has to be something that just, is more natural.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, what about other things can you recommend or anything that you've enjoyed recently? TV shows, movies, just I don't know. Is there anything to kind of leave us with?
Well, I just watched the first episode of Back to Derry, what is it called? Derry, whatever, the Stephen King.
Welcome to Derry, the
Welcome to
on HBO,
Derry. Yeah.
the new It show.
Yeah, I watched that and that was really interesting. It was surprising and way different than I thought it was going to be. Um, and then I've been watching like on Tubi and there's all of these collections of short form like Twilight Zone, but
Mhm.
they're all these different ones. One was thrillers, and it's just a collection of thrillers from the 1970s, which I love the 1970s. So watching old shows like that, I found really fun. It's just I just love Alfred Hitchcock and all of that.
Yeah, yeah. The Hitchcock. There was also like you're not talking about like the Rod Serling stuff, or I'm trying to think
Yeah,
like
it's
Hitchcock.
similar to Twilight Zone, but there's the Hitchcock Hour.
Was it
There's
Ellery Queen? I think there was an Ellery Queen
yeah, there was
hour or
one of
something like
those.
that. Or maybe I'm completely off. I have no idea.
Yeah, well, and there's
So,
also a horror series that's from the 70s that I finished watching. And of course, I can't remember any titles right now, but
yeah.
that was on Amazon Prime and that was awesome. It was really good. Good horror
Okay.
stories.
And if people wanted to stalk you online, where's the best way to do
Uh-huh.
that?
I'm most active on Instagram, and you just look for Tanya Eby. I do a lot of foraging, like mushrooms I'm kind of obsessed with. So there's stuff on there about narrating and foraging, cooking, writing, whatever. I'm active on Facebook and LinkedIn, and a little bit on Threads.
I always forget
So
that Threads is a thing. I don't
yeah,
know
and
why I'm not.
it is starting to feel a little more old school Twitter, which I loved Twitter when it was in its, I mean, I was kind of an
Yeah.
early, um, took that on pretty early, but it has that kind of feel to it. So I'm doing more and more over there too.
Okay.
And then I have Substack because I've got a million things that I like to do. So,
Yeah. As if you were not already busy enough,
uh-huh.
Tanya. So, okay. Well, thank you so much for making time to hang out. Everyone needs to go check out all of Tanya's the books that she's written. The Tuesday. Can you real quick? Where'd the
Yeah,
title come from for Tuesday Girl, or does that like is like a spoiler from the memoir?
it's not a spoiler, girl. It's not a spoiler. Uh, it's not a spoiler. It's the Tuesday girl in my mind is a woman who isn't worth the weekend. You only want to
Hmm.
call her up on a Tuesday or when you have like a little time in your schedule. So that's where that came from.
Julie was right. That's very visceral. That's
Yeah.
very. It's so.
Ouch.
But okay. All right. Well, again, everybody check out. I mean, God, if people have you ever encountered anybody or emailed you where they like try to like, I mean, so many audiobooks. I'm sure at this point it's probably impossible to listen to every single thing that you've ever recorded at this point, just because, so many hours in the day. But
No, I mean, it's definitely over like 10,000 hours in the booth. So if you think about that magic number of being an expert, I'm definitely there. I don't know how many years. Like I should figure that out. I should figure out how many years I've actually been in the booth recording. It's a lot.
yeah, wow. So.
Yeah.
All right. Again, Tanya, thank you so much for making time. Everyone go check out all Tanya's books that she's written, all the stuff that she's narrated. Go watch the Netflix Nailed It Holiday, where she, spoiler alert, wins her episode. So thanks again, Tanya, and we'll see everybody next time. Bye.